It doesn't have to be complicated. It kind of depends on how you look at it. The state can only regulate so much, and it's around 20% of the insurance market where the state can make a rule that applies to it, where you can say you have to cover autism.
Is that because who funds it? If it's a state-funded program like
basically, we'll kind of step
Okay.
through that. And the law that we passed, the legislators were really worried about small business owners. They said, we don't want this applied to small group insurance, which is companies that are 2 through 50. So that's the orange part. And SB 57 covered the blue part. There's a rule that came out and said, we're going to define small group to be 2 to 100 instead of 2 to 50, which changes things by like a percentage point. And then back to good news, they passed another act that says states can decide whether they want to define the small group market as 2 to 50 or 2 to 100, and Utah it's still 2 to 50. So basically that means that my charts are all going to be a little bit off, but I was too lazy to go through and fix them. More good news, in 2012, SB 138 passed saying if you do a health insurance mandate, the state has to cover that for its own state employees' health plan, school districts, higher ed, and CHIP. So at the time, we really kind of resisted this because we felt it was a ploy to stick a fiscal note on our bill that really didn't have one before. So we were kind of upset about that, but since we were able to get it passed, it means that a whole bunch more people, you can see it's like almost 6% get insurance where they didn't have it before. Medicaid. Medicaid now, in the past year, they've started covering autism, and it's pretty good coverage actually. It's up to age 21, and we'll go through what that is later, but that's all good news. Just this year, in February of this year, it was just an administrative decision, but the Federal Employees Health Benefit Plan administrators said all coverage has to include autism and ADA therapy. So that's going to start next year. And there are actually quite a lot of federal employees in Utah. So another big chunk is federally regulated stuff. It's self-funded plans. They go under something called ERISA. And we'll talk about what self-funded is versus fully insured plans. But basically, it's federally regulated, so we can't pass a state law on it. And those are typically companies that have maybe 500 employees or more. It could be even companies with as little as 200 employees may try to self-fund. And it's basically a way to save money on health insurance by assuming the risk. There's still lots of uninsured people in Utah, around 11%. And that last little chunk there is Medicare, HIP, and PCN. Not exactly sure what those are, but I don't think it's a lot of young people who might be needing treatment for autism. Kind of more good news this year, United Healthcare, which is one of the largest insurers in the country, came out and said, we're just going to add ADA to all of our plans if it's a fully insured plan. Self-funded plans, if they specifically say we're not going to cover ADA, then they won't do it. But basically, by default, they're going to include ADA coverage. And United has about 6% of that insurance market in Utah. And probably the difference between what SB 57 covered and this is that the small group plans will probably get it. That's my guess. I don't really know for sure. So who's covered? We kind of went through that a little bit. One thing to know is that when the bill goes into effect January 1 of this year, but it's not until your plan is actually renewed after that date that the coverage starts. And things like the school system, their plans I think often start around the time school starts. So that's one thing to know. And there is an age limit on the bill, so it's ages 2 through 9, which is not as good as Medicaid. But. So the coverage includes diagnosis, pharmacy, psychiatric, psychological, and a whole lot of other things. It specifically calls out ADA and says that you need a licensed care provider or a practitioner of mental health services. there's a limit to the number of hours. It's 600 hours a year, which isn't a ton, but for instance, it's good for maybe a summer plan. If your kid's in school most of the year, that would be a pretty good intensive summer program. And then they can't review the treatment plans more than every 6 months, more frequently than that. There are more facts on our website, and I think if you go to the table outside, we've got a few of the facts printed up there. Medicaid coverage is actually really good. It goes up to age 21. There's individual behavior therapy is limited to 30 hours a week, which is a good amount, and they will consider requests for greater than 30 hours a week by going through a review process. And there are options for group therapy too. We'll talk about what it takes to be eligible for that. So I pulled this off the Department of Health's website. Basically, this is the federal poverty level. So for one person, if they earn $11,770 a year or less, then they're considered at the federal poverty level. And you can go up to a family of 4, and then these are the requirements for Medicaid and at different age limits. But look at CHIP, for instance. Like if you had a family of 4, it's 200% of the federal poverty level, so that's twice this amount. You could earn $48,000 and still be eligible for CHIP. So a lot of people don't realize that they're eligible, and if you're close, I've been told by the Department of Health that you should go ahead and try to apply, because they may be able to work with it and figure out a way to get you CHIP. And CHIP is a really good deal. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I think it depends on your income, but it's like on the order of $75 a quarter, something like that, which is pretty nice. We would like to improve SB 57 if we can. Obviously, getting rid of the age caps would be nice. Salt Lake County, when they did their plan, they made it so there were different caps at different age levels, but you could still get some therapy after like age 9. We'd like to increase the treatment limit, because 600 hours a year is not very much. It's got a sunset clause right now, so it's going to expire if we don't renew it. And it's also got kind of a fuse in there that the insurance companies really push for. And basically, if costs go up by a certain amount, then the bill gets voided. We don't think it's going to hit that, and we have data from a lot of other states. There are 43 other states that have implemented this, and particularly with where it's a state employee health plan, we have access to the data, so we can see from the actual numbers.
And do we have data about how therapy helps after age 9? I mean, that would be something I would think we'd want to know. I mean,
Right.
that they'd want to know to say, if you intensive in this first little bit, what helps the most after age 9?
Right.
Is there any
It
research?
hasn't been studied nearly as much. I know there are a few studies out there,
Mhm.
but according to the BCBA that works with my son, he's really into research, and he said that that's an area that needs to be studied a lot more, and need more data to prove
Sure.
that. But there are a lot of reasons to do behavioral therapy after that age, and you would kind of be focusing on different things.
Yeah, I would think like as you get into adolescence, it would be a different set of goals, and then,
Right.
you know what I mean, to try to help the kids transition. So.
Yeah. And the population that we're talking about has a really wide variety of abilities too.
Right.
If you've met one person with autism, you've
Yeah.
met one person.
What about
So-
the therapy offered through school? How does that figure into all this? Does that count toward the number of hours, or do they use that?
No, the insurance companies, when they consider something to be therapeutic versus educational, they're not going to pay for anything they consider to be educational. And most school systems aren't doing behavioral therapy in a rigorous form. And it varies so much between different school systems what you're going to get.
So they might be getting speech therapy or occupational therapy, but nothing in behavioral therapy in the school setting, right?
Not in Utah.
Yeah.
In a lot of other parts of the country, you will get it. And
Okay.
there's a really good case to be made for saying, my kid needs behavioral therapy in the place where he's having problems.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of cases where you would say he needs behavioral therapy in the classroom, and I'll pay for it. But
Mhm.
How about the special schools like Spectrum? Do they do differently?
I'm not sure how Spectrum works. I mean, my son went to Pingree for a while, and They do a form of behavioral therapy in there, and of course you pay for that privately, and I think Medicaid is paying for some people in there. But yeah. So these are some of the threats to SB 57. It's got a sunset clause. If we don't renew it, it'll expire. Typically, legislators are prone to renew stuff like that because it's people are getting so much of a benefit from it. They're not going to want to be the bad guys who knock it down. We do need to be prepared to reinforce that with them, though. Any law can be repealed. Nobody's trying to do that right now. There's a clause in the bill saying the Attorney General could say this isn't in compliance with the ACA, and we kind of talked to the AG's office. As far as I know, they're not planning to do that. And there's the 1% premium increase issue, and you can see over there. Those are some of the numbers from other states, and if you look at the per member per month charges, it's not that much. So you can look at the number of people covered, the number of dollars in autism claims, and divide that through, and those are the numbers you get.
It's a big variance.
It is kind of a big variance. Some of it depends on how much infrastructure there is for BCBAs. Why would you be a BCBA in a place where there's no insurance coverage or where people can't afford it? So, and that's an issue here in Utah too. It's probably hard to find a therapist right now.
It looks like they're popping up though. We just heard about like Matthew's Place and what's the other place? Springdale.
Yeah. They'll come. They'll ramp up.
Yeah.
And we know that in places like Louisiana, when they passed their law, they created huge numbers of jobs, like 8,000 new jobs. So individual plans, theoretically, you could go on the healthcare.gov and buy an individual plan that would cover this. These enrollment dates are for last year, but I was too lazy to update. So that's something you can go and look at the plans, and I've kind of reviewed some of the plans on there without purchasing, and they do provide things that seem to match up with SB 57. So this is the map from last year, basically showing all the states where mandates have been passed. Oklahoma just passed theirs, North Carolina just passed one too, so there's now 44 states. These are some of the things that insurers have done and ways the law messed up. In Indiana, they passed a bill in 2001, but there was some imprecision in the wording, so insurers weren't covering stuff, and it took until 2006 to fix it. In New York, they passed a mandate in 2011, and the Department of Financial Services said, oh, you have to have state licensed providers, but there wasn't a way to get one of those. So in a state with 20 million people, there are about 24 who can practice. In Michigan, Blue Cross Blue Shield required diagnosis at specific centers, and there are only 3, which led to waiting lists of 18 months. Some other things that happen on the insurer side, they just don't know ADA yet. Like it takes a while to, until the process gets in place, they don't know how to handle it. And they're not used to services that take place in the home. Like they expect psychological care to happen in an office, but you need your therapy to be happening where the problems are occurring. Sometimes,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to ask you what efforts were made to try to educate the insurers about that process, what ADA is, what it does, what
Right.
they mean. I mean, has there been effort around that too?
we haven't made an effort towards that. In cases like Salt Lake County, when they adopted their benefit, that worked out some of the kinks. Every time one of these things happens, the insurers know a little bit more. We unfortunately have, well, fortunately or unfortunately, we have Select Health here, which is a very kind of localized regional thing, and they do a great job in a lot of ways, but they don't have the experience of some of the national insurance companies. So that's a little bit of a problem. There's also, like in remote areas, in rural places, getting a supervisor to come and travel all the way out there to spend an hour or two supervising, that can be hard to do. So remote supervision is a thing that can actually work in this situation. So you can do it over the internet or
Telehealth.
telehealth, kind of, and they're hesitant to want to provide that or pay for it. And you have to watch out for just inconsistent policies and processes between insurance companies, and sometimes you get approved services denied. We'll talk about, later on we can talk about some of the ways that you can be prepared for that. We worry about a bottleneck in Utah, kind of mentioned it before. Right now, back in September, this was the number of people who had passed the licensing process. The universities are ramping up and getting programs to train people kind of all around.
Tell me what the BCBA stands for.
Board Certified Behavioral
Behavioral
Analysts.
Analysts. Okay.
And there's kind of a bachelor level and a doctorate, master's level. So if you get a claim denied, you may have a limited amount of time to contest it, but if you have a basis, then it's worth doing. And in 2013, 132 out of 180 claims complaints were ruled as justified. So, there is a good reason to try and push back. So on our website, we've got a little thing where you can say report an insurance issue. This isn't going to be like an official thing where action will be taken, but we would like to kind of know if people are having problems with insurance claims, just to, so when we go and talk to legislators and whatnot, we can say these are the problems that the insurers have been causing. So how do you find out if you're covered? You can look at your claims documentation, you can call your HR department, you can call the insurance company. Autism Speaks, and I talk about them a good bit. They've been, there's kind of the Autism Speaks that does the walks and does a lot of other stuff, and then there's the government affairs wing, and that's the people that we've been dealing with, and I really like them a lot. They're good people, and they've been really pushing things around the country, and they're smart. This is one of the tools that have been developed to help you figure out your insurance, because it is kind of complicated. If you go to that link right there, it will walk you through how to figure out what kind of insurance you have. And one big thing is, are you fully insured or self-funded? So the difference between those is, when you're fully insured, your company, and my wife was saying, you're making some value judgments when you put that guy up there. But I like every company I've worked for. Anyway, they basically enter a contractual agreement for a period of time, usually a year. They'll pay some fixed amount and say, you handle the insurance for our employees, and the insurance company assumes all the risk. So it's usually, they'll charge for that. So it's more expensive to do that depending on how many claims are filed, and then they pay the providers directly. With a self-funded plan, if the company's big enough, they assume the risk. So they'll pay an insurance company to administer stuff and decide who needs to get paid, but in the end, basically, whatever claims are filed, the company is responsible for that. And it just depends on how many claims are filed, whether it's a good choice for the company or not. But in general, it's a cheaper way to go, so a lot of larger companies will do that. And like we said before, they're governed by federal rules. Autism Speaks has been working to change the federal rules, so if they can get that done, it would make it so you don't have to go company by company, and self-funded plans would be included. It's been kind of a, with all this stuff over the ACA and the way Congress is right now, it's been hard to do. That could change. It's an election year. Who knows what will happen? But they are trying to do that. Self-funded plans can choose to cover autism. Around 78% of large employers. This is according to a Mercer survey. And I think they've looked at companies with over 500 employees, and a lot of them offer some autism benefit. Around 31% volunteer include behavioral therapy. And employers want their benefits packages to be competitive, and autism coverage is kind of becoming the standard. These are some of the companies that offer behavioral therapy coverage. So Adobe Systems is a big one in Utah. You can see Google and Apple and Facebook and all these big companies are offering it. Salt Lake County's up there. Home Depot is a good autism-friendly company. I think the CEO has a grandkid or something like that, so he gets it. So if you want to try and advocate, if you have self-funded coverage and want to try and advocate for it, you can do that. And you need to figure out who the people are that make that decision. Usually it's going to be a committee of people, and once a year they'll meet and decide what they're going to cover for the next year. My wife's company is a law firm, and they decided to provide coverage that matches SB 57. So I'm getting one summer of coverage for my son before he ages out. That's cool. You'll wind up asking for a meeting one way or another. Maybe you call somebody, maybe you write a letter, but you'll want to try and meet with them. And they're not going to, mostly, they're not going to know anything about autism, so you have to educate them. Before my son was diagnosed, I didn't know anything about it, and I've learned a lot over the past few years. You can look at what the company says on its website about their commitment to family values and their employees and all those kinds of things, and try to put that in perspective with your own experience, and often you can convince them. Autism Speaks has a toolkit to help. It kind of describes the whole process. It provides materials that you can present to the employer and say, this is what autism is, this is what behavioral therapy is, explaining your own situation and how you've been affected. Autism Speaks will actually send somebody out to attend that meeting with you, and they have about a 70% success rate in getting companies to add coverage. This guy is actually one who might come. His name's Mike Wasmer. He's a veterinarian from Kansas, and he has a daughter with autism. He's the state government affairs rep, and so he's the one who helped us get our bill passed here in Utah. And these are some of the questions that people often had. Do you want to attend the meeting alone or with other parents? And Mike says basically, you don't want to intimidate them. Autism moms can go in and they're very passionate about what they're trying to get done, and it can be scary for people on the other side of the table. Do you want to bring your affected child? Mike says that in the past, he's kind of said, no, you want to be able to talk to them, and you don't want to get distracted, and you may not have much time, but he has attended at least one meeting where both parents worked and they couldn't get childcare, and brought their teenage daughter, who was stimming and vocalizing and doing stuff all through the meeting, and after like 10 minutes, 2 of the 3 people on the other side of the table were crying and said, yes, we'll give you coverage. So it might help or it might not. They may say no, like you don't know what the company's finances are like or whatnot, but it may just be a bad year, so maybe you go back the next year. And of course you have to be polite and not lose your temper, you want to keep your job. If they say yes, Autism Speaks wants to know, they can help craft the benefit, because a lot of HR people aren't going to know what a benefit should look like. They're willing to help with that. And they also, they keep a list of companies and will promote them and say, hey, look what this company did as an example to other companies. So these are some general tips about dealing with insurance companies. You want to find out what state your plan is funded in. My friend Noelle, turns out her plan, even though she lived and worked in Utah, her plan was funded in Florida, where they had a mandate, and so she was able to get coverage when she tracked down what that was. If you don't have coverage in your plan, you can get comorbid conditions treated, like your child may be dealing with anxiety or depression or speech delays or other things, and if it doesn't have autism attached to it, you can still get some treatment. You can get OT or speech therapy or treatment for anxiety. To do that, you need to find out what the procedure codes and diagnosis codes and work with your provider. So there are specific codes where this is an autism diagnosis and it has this thing. Or you can get just the code that says this is anxiety. And if you work with your provider, you can make sure that the machine that stamps things when it comes through is not going to reject your claim. You will probably spend a lot of time talking to the insurance company, and you want to try and document everything. It's a pain to do, but with every phone call, you want to try and get the person's name, their employee number, a call reference number. And when you're talking about your provider, providers have a tax ID, and you can use that to make sure they have the correct provider. You don't want to wind up with two providers named Cindy Smith, and one of them's in the network and one of them's not. Insurance company operators are going to be probably taking notes about your call, and if you want to make sure you've got everything straight, you can ask them to read their notes to you. All that stuff gets logged into a computer system, and if you reference that call reference number, you can say, your employee told me on this date that this was going to be covered. And when it's something large, when it's 6 months worth of therapy or something like that, it's going to cost a lot of money. You want to try and get them to say two callers to give you the correct answer more than once. If you can't find an in-network provider, which is something that might happen here in Utah, you can ask for a single case agreement. Some different companies, I think, have different rules of thumb, but basically if you can't find somebody within 60 miles who's in network, you can find somebody and say, I want a single case agreement for this, and they'll bring somebody into the network just for you. And that can also apply when, there are lots of psychologists who might be in the network, but very few of them are going to be autism specialists. And if you want an autism specialist, then you can talk to them and say, I want a single case agreement to bring this guy in, because this is the person who can help my child. You also want to try and find out what the dates of that in-network agreement are to make sure you're covered, because those contracts expire and things like that. So you don't want to wind up with a big bill. You might want to get a single case agreement extended to other family members. If autism doesn't just affect the person who's got it. Other people get depressed, siblings get depressed, parents have issues, and if you can go to one psychologist's office, it can be a lot better. So just think about that if you're doing a single case agreement. When you're talking on the phone with them, be polite, but don't be afraid to say, I have to go, and hang up and call right back. You'll probably get a different operator who may have a different attitude. You can also ask to talk to a supervisor. If you have a really urgent needs, and sometimes they're going to say, well, the approval process for this is going to take 15 days. But if you're dealing with, say, sleep deprivation, if your kid is waking up every night and you really need to see a psychologist, and because you're not sleeping, and it can be really miserable. I'm not sure every company has this keyword, but urgent, emergent, ad hoc request. At least one insurance company, the operator basically said, I can tell you're having some trouble. This is the thing you need to say to me to make this happen. And she said it, and they got into the psychologist the next day. You want to check your bill, insurance companies make mistakes. You can appeal provider rates. If the insurer is not providing competitive payment to the provider that you want to get, you can appeal that. Doing all this talking to insurance companies takes lots of time and energy. You can get somebody to help you. There's something called a legal medical surrogate, and that could be your brother or sister or a family friend or somebody who's really good at detailed stuff. You could hire a law student if you wanted to. If you don't have the energy to do it, and your finances are such that you really, really need insurance to cover something, you can get help that way. A lot of this stuff, I've kind of cobbled together multiple presentations from the Autism Mandate Summit that we had back in September. If you go to our website, you can review those videos there. Okay, so that's most of my talk about insurance stuff. I'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking about other issues that affect people with autism, and it's only a few slides. So health insurance is really important, but it's not the only one our community has to deal with. Do y'all know who that is? So 20-something with autism, and that's his therapist right there, about to be shot by police, who said that they were actually trying to shoot the autistic guy, and they missed. So there are lots of challenges, but there are solutions. Healthcare is getting better. We need to change SB 57 so the age limits are higher, and the other stuff we talked about. There's also police interactions. In that situation I just showed you, that really should have been handled by a CIT officer. Y'all know what CIT is? It's a crisis intervention team. And Utah apparently has a really good CIT program. And what they do is they get volunteers to get extra training on how to deal with people in a mental crisis. And it's not just autism, it could be people dealing with drug addiction or whatever, but they do talk about autism and learn about it. And those officers who get that extra training basically volunteer to accept those calls. When there's a call where they know there's some kind of crisis, they're the ones who handle it. So they wind up handling like 5 times as many calls as other officers, so they become experts in it. And they're trained in how to de-escalate things, and they know that an autistic person may not respond to commands, and applying force to them may not work, and they're going to resist like crazy against handcuffs or whatever. One thing I would like to see is Smart 911, which if you combine that with CIT would be really good. Smart 911 is a program where you can pre-register with the 911 system, and it's a private vendor makes this product, and it's kind of gone around nationwide. Layton has it. It's the only place in Utah, and they've tried to get the state 911 board to adopt it, but I don't know if you're following what's going on with 911, but there's been some like financial shenanigans and other stuff, so it's really hard to get stuff done right now with that. But for my family, I would love to be able to say, this is my child, this is what he looks like, he's prone to wandering, he's not going to respond to what you do, lights and sirens may freak him out, and if I call 911, they will know to send a CIT officer, or at least give the responding officer this information. And you can go to Smart 911 and register for free and upload pictures and stuff, and if you happen to be traveling in a place where Smart 911 worked, it would help. We know there's education issues. IEPs are a crazy process where, I forget how many there are in Utah, but like 30,000 or something IEPs happen every year, and parents go into a meeting with a bunch of school employees and have to try and negotiate for their child every few months. I don't know that you can change that process, but it's a tough process. It's not like with getting our insurance mandate, we're all able to work together and coordinate on things. Here, it's like you alone against the school system, and the Utah Parent Center does a good job of helping people prepare for that. But other issues with education funding for special ed, back when we had the sequestration, that was really bad for special ed funding, and teachers were let go, and programs were reduced, and tell your legislators that shutting down the government and sequestration are not good ways to handle it, because it's really extra hard on special ed. Jobs and housing, wandering, financial planning. We got ABLE accounts passed recently. Do y'all know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Achieving a Better Life Experience. It's like 529 college savings plans, but for people with a disability. And basically you can sock away a certain amount of money in these accounts. You already pay taxes on them, but you get a tax credit for doing it, and any interest that they accrue is tax-free. And the nice thing about ABLE accounts is that they won't interfere with other benefits, which like SSI, for instance. And when somebody with a disability, if they have too much money, basically they become disqualified for certain government programs. But with something like this, it's not applied against that. So you can actually plan for your child's future, and there's some limits to it. Like if you hit $100,000, it pauses your benefits that you get from the government, and you don't have to reapply for them when you drop below that threshold. So that was passed on national level.
Do you have to wait to a certain level to age to use those accounts? Like, is it like they have to be 21 to use it, or is it?
I don't think so.
You could use it.
I
assume it's for like planning for sort of adulthood when they may not be able to support themselves.
That's the
right?
idea behind it. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was passed on a federal level, and then we had to pass something here in Utah. Every state had to implement it, and that was passed. Todd Weiler sponsored it, not for autism, but because of someone he knew that had muscular dystrophy or some other disability. And
so it's any disability. It's not just
right.
autism.
And it's run into some bumps. Like they put out a call for like a request for proposal from the financial institutions, and from what I understand, nobody stepped up. But Weiler is going to be working on getting it so, and they'll have to pass legislation for this, getting it so that Utahns can get an ABLE account in another state and get the tax credit and stuff like that. So there's more work to be done with that.
So if someone is interested in that, who would they contact for the ABLE accounts? Is that something you go to your
website.
a website, or you go to the bank, or where do you go to get information?
It's going to be administered through I think Workforce Services, one of the state, because you have to prove that you're eligible for it.
I got it, okay.
Yeah. So it'll be the state government.
So it's not like the USB, not as well defined, it's a USB kind of right
I mean, it's kind of new, basically, and it's got this extra eligibility requirement.
But eventually, your picture will be sort of like the USB accounts.
Yeah, and I know Autism Speaks is working on making it so you could move money from a 529 into one of these, or vice versa. So, kids' abilities can change. You don't know when you're planning when they're 10 years old if they're going to be able to attend college and whatnot. But there's still work going on a federal level for those. I don't know if y'all know about the DSPD and getting on the waiting list and how it generally works, but right now there's a pretty big waiting list for services for people who are disabled. And the kind of standard from what I hear from other states, and it's in Utah too, is basically when an adult needs help with housing, they need support, they may need somebody to be monitoring them most of the time, it's really hard to get that. And typically they expect the child to stay with the parent until the parent is in a crisis, like has had a heart attack or is unable to care for them, and then you can finally get assistance for that disabled person. That's how you move off the waiting list in a lot of places, and I think in Utah too. And that's not a good situation for somebody who needs a regular life and stuff to live 30 years as an adult with your parent and then suddenly be moved into a group home or whatever. It's a good goal would be to try and get people into independent housing as soon as possible in kind of the least restrictive environment. So there's work to be done there. Specialist Learn, I just kind of popped that in there. It's not a government program, that's a company, but they are trying to hire people with autism to do things like quality assurance. People who, autism has a lot of things, but quality assurance is a place where attention to detail and repetitive tasks are actually being able to handle those things is a function that typical people may not be able to do quite as well. So they're trying to kind of play to the strengths of people with autism. And right now the Columbus Center is working on getting their own kind of version of that, and I think Specialist Learn is going to help them. So it's hard to advocate, when we have the Utah Autism Coalition, and every one of our members almost has somebody with autism in their family, and they're dealing with sleep deprivation and tantrums and all this kind of stuff. But and also we're kind of a diverse group. Everybody's got different levels of ability, and social skills are not necessarily our strong point. Even with all that, we managed to pass an insurance mandate in Utah, which people didn't think we could do. Like, I have friends who, like coworkers of my wife, who are lobbyists in different industries, and they were shocked when we were able to get this passed. But your legislators will actually listen to you. They want to hear from a constituent, but if you actually say, I live in your district, and this means a lot to me, and this is how it's affecting my family, and I'm going to vote, and I'm going to get all my friends to vote, and you need to listen to this. They will listen to you. Orrin Hatch has been great in terms of special needs, special ed, and all that kind of stuff. Mike Lee, maybe not so much. Autism Speaks, for 10 years they've been doing a lot of stuff. They got autism coverage in 44 states. Local groups like the Utah Autism Coalition worked with them. They gave us sample legislation and helped us look out for problems, and kind of provided the expert evidence and whatnot. They got TRICARE coverage. They've been, they were kind of behind the Medicaid administrative change. Autism Cares Act is about research. They got that passed. Able accounts passed. Avante's law just passed the Senate. It's waiting for the House now, and that is about wandering and safety, basically, in public schools. Avante Akindo was a kid in New York who wandered off the school grounds and was found drowned a couple of days later. And the school, you know, they've got it on video of him walking out the door. And the school just didn't pay attention to him. And I know of cases here in Salt Lake where, you know, the person had a teacher who should have been with them, or an aide, and that person was sick that day, and the school didn't provide any backup, and the person wandered away and was found on State Street. 21st Century Cures is, I think that is actually, we looked it up on the way here, I think that's passed and has been signed into law. And that's changing the FDA approval process for how treatments are worked on. And part of it is kind of, I know they want to do this because there are ways to individualize treatment for autism based on like your DNA. So that doesn't really match up with the current FDA methods. Those are some of the issues Autism Speaks has been working on. 1 in 54 may seem like a kind of a high rate, but it's not when it comes to changing public policy, so that's why we have to stick together. And there's our website. If you want to join our mailing list, there's a place to click and get involved. And we don't send out a lot of email. Sometimes we do a survey. When it's the legislative session, then we may say, hey, there's this bill and we really want to talk to somebody. And we try and find out like who your representative is or who your senator is, and only if we need to move that legislator do we ask you to do stuff. And we're on Facebook too. We do a lot of work there. Anyway, that's my pitch. Do you guys have any questions?
That's great.
Do you have a list of providers for ABA?
I don't have a list of providers, but if you go to like the state's Department of Health's website, I've found a list of providers there before that they use for the autism waiver and that I'm sure they're using for the new Medicaid rules, and that would be a list. You could probably find it through, there's a license now, so there's a licensing board that might be able to.
It seems like that would be something that would be very helpful on your website if you have that.